And, I suppose you'd tell me they're all stunning falls from grace, whether we're talking about Bill Clinton, Eliot Spitzer, Hugh Grant, John Edwards, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the list goes on. But somehow doesn't the resignation of David Petraeus, a military hero, an intelligence boss, and even a rumored presidential candidate, seem to be the most stunning of all? I mean, all the other ones seem to be more fitting in the role of the sort of scoundrel cheating spouse, but Petraeus was Mr. Clean. Let's forget about the details of the affair that brought him down. I mean, the biographer he apparently got too close to, she wrote harassing emails to some other woman. We haven't quite figured out what role she played in all this yet, but another woman in the general's life, telling the other woman to back off. The FBI investigated those newsletters, those emails which were rather harassing, and soon after that, Petraeus has resigned as the head of the CIA and has his affair on the front pages of all the newspapers. I don't want to ask Sarah Dimmerman or you about that, but rather about a question raised by the Huffington Post and by Lisa Belkin in particular, writing in the Huffington Post. And she says, what is it about powerful men and sex? And she goes on to kind of imply that more of the decisions seem to be made, if you will, by the little head, as it were, as opposed to the other one. Now, in the Post, she states, or quotes other people who state, that the whole phenomenon of grown men and their little peepees, that's her words, is amazing, and that so many exalted men seem willing to burn down their lives in order, again to use her words, to get laid. And the article goes on to say that these men basically are using sex, these powerful exalted men, to assert their power. Now, if you agree that that's what powerful men seem to do, the number to call is 416-872-1010 or StarTalk 8255. We'll open the phone numbers up. Those are your phone numbers, or by text at 71010. But let me summarize where I come from on this before we bring Sarah into it and get the discussion going, shall we say. Number one, I don't think there is any question that in the majority, though not all of cases, that men have a higher sex drive than women. And I would guess in many cases that powerful men would have a higher sex drive than the average man, because they're, after all, people who are driven. So I would think that the notion powerful men would get into this kind of trouble more often would stand to reason to me. I'm not excusing it. I'm not saying it's great, but I'm just saying it would stand to reason. And it would stand to reason that men seem to be singled out as the perpetrators on this more often than women. Number two, if men have a problem with their little peepees, to quote Lisa Belkin, I don't think it is a problem confined to powerful men. The exalted ones have their affairs on the front page because they are public figures. But I will ask Sarah if there aren't just as many ordinary men who end up with this kind of a zipper problem, but just don't get it written up on the front pages of the paper. Point three. Can this in fact be a problem for men alone with their little peepees, to quote Sarah Belkin, or is it perhaps some kind of a physical or emotional need that lots of people, men and women, must both have, since each of these affairs, I'm assuming, involves, in most cases, a man and a woman? I realize there will be some exceptions to that nowadays and elsewhere, but they involve a man and a woman. So is it fair or is it appropriate to say this is a problem of men alone and their peepees, to quote Lisa Belkin? And finally, if it is all about asserting power through sex for famous or non-famous men, does that make all the women submissive victims of circumstance? Or, again, is it back to it takes two to tango here, as it were? I think more of this lies in the fact that for every 10, human relationships, there will be a certain number which are lifeless or unhappy. But what do I know? I mean, you know this. Sarah knows this. We're going to bring her on now, but I do invite you to join the conversation. 416-872-1010, StarTalk 8255. Is this all about men and their little peepees, to quote Sarah Belkin? Is this all about the so-called little head making decisions when the other head should be used? And so I want to know if this is a problem that is largely confined to or can be laid at the doorstep mostly of men, as opposed to it being circumstances that involve oftentimes both men and women. We, of course, know Sarah Dimmerman. She joins us each week. She is a therapist. She's a relationship expert. She can be found on the internet at helpmesarah.com. Sarah, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. So
Wow, John, that's a lot of information.
Well, it is, but I mean, I was just trying to sort of say, look, at the article that I read in the Huffington Post was kind of written up on the basis this can all be laid at the doorstep of men and their little peepees, to quote the author.
Yeah.
And I think that's a bit simplistic, but look, you're the expert. What do you say?
Well, I think that women, in my practice and just all around, I think that almost as many women are having affairs or cheating as men. But as you said, it's the powerful men that are maybe getting onto the front pages. But I think the reality is that women are better at having affairs than men, meaning that they're less likely to be caught. Because I think
Well,
women...
there'd be a lot of men listening who'd wonder how they organize that.
Well, I think because women are planners, they have strategies,
Okay.
they're more discreet. When they have affairs, they are not as impulsive, they're not as driven by the little head, and they plan it out, and they're very
So
careful.
are you suggesting by saying that women's affairs are not as driven by sex, but rather maybe more driven by emotional considerations, and therefore it just is different? Is that...
No,
is that...
I think just when women... No, I think that women probably... I mean, men have testosterone and women don't, so I think some men are more driven sexually, and women sometimes can't separate their emotion from sex as some men can. But I think that there are a lot of women who are driven by sex as well, and men and women get into affairs for different reasons. I think it's more that men in general, are more easily found out. I think men leave a lot of telltale signs around that women don't. Women are a lot more careful by nature. They're, as I said, they're planners. They think ahead. They think about, if they have a lie and they tell somebody something, they're more clever about, covering their tracks and remembering what they said, whereas a man might do something or might leave something lying around that a woman might not. So I think that it's typically the men that are being caught. I mean, there was an article that I saw that said Farrah Fawcett was having an affair for 11 years. Brian O'Neill even found out about it, and he may not even have been the first to find out. Maybe the media found out first. So I think in general, women are just much more discreet and much more careful, and men are more impulsive, so they may react quicker, and they might, as you said, be led by their little pee-pees.
I didn't say it. It was Lisa Belkin that said it. I resent the use of the word little, not
Exactly.
peepees. Sarah, I've got to have you hold on there. Sarah Dirmerman, of course, is with us, as she is each week at this time. She can be found at helpmesarah.com. We want you to phone 416-872-1010, Star Talk 8255. Is it fair to lay all this or a lot of this at the doorstep of men when it comes to men being caught out in these kinds of affairs like General Petraeus? Some text messages coming in, and I thank you for those. John, I don't subscribe to extramarital affairs. However, in my 45-plus years of sexual awareness, I have seen men of all stations addicted to sex. That's sort of to my point about the powerful get written up. Women are just more vindictive and call your wife, are still hoping to get you back in the sack or use it for blackmail or for more sex. Let's see now. So that means women are better at deceit, is a question being asked here in terms of one of the comments that Sarah just made about women being better planners. And then one that I've just got to read to you. You got to hear this, Sarah. This is the last one I'll read before we move on to some phone calls. My marital issues, says this listener, are between my tiny pee-pee, 2 women, a clown, a goat, and a putter. I'm glad the putter was mentioned because, that's very important that putters do come into this. I mean, golf is involved in a lot of these kinds of things. Let's go to the phones and talk to Mike in Rexdale. You're on News Talk 1010. Mike?
Hello, sir.
Hi.
I just want to change my first comment just a little bit based on that conversation you had. Let's be real. For every man that has an affair, there's a woman having an affair.
Right.
Number one. Number two, I am a single man, and I've had affairs with married women, and there is nothing but sex in there. And I can guarantee you, and I'll tell all the men out there, the best sex you ever want to have in the world is with a married woman. Guaranteed. There's no emotion. It's just raw sex. Number three, when you look at the military men are probably 80% more. They're away from their families. They're exposed to a machismo lifestyle. I mean, affairs to them is just taken for part of the job.
I'm gonna get Sarah to process those comments, Mike. I thank you very much for the call, and I will point out, Sarah, that this woman was over there writing the biography with the General Petraeus in Afghanistan, I think it was, and that but it's against the Army's code of conduct to do this. I mean, not that means people don't do it. It's against the Bible, I guess, to be sleeping with other women too.
Right. Well, just to comment, in terms of what Mike said, I think he was actually confirming what we were saying. He was saying that, and as you had said, that when men are having affairs, women are having the affairs with them. Now, some of those women may not actually be married women, but a lot of them are. And Mike said that he's a single man, and he says the best sex he's ever had is with a married woman. What he's saying is that married women will have sex for the sake of having sex in the same way as we think men might have sex without needing the emotional attachment. So for some women, perhaps, I think there's all different reasons why women have extramarital affairs, as there are as many for men to have. So it's certainly interesting to hear Mike's comments, but I think he's actually affirming what we already said.
Well, do you agree with what I said earlier? I want to get back to the phones, but that a lot of this is rooted in relationships that either become unhappy or just become listless, and people then, stray off into maybe not even starting with sex. They start off with something less.
100%. I think a lot of relationships begin very benignly, in a workplace or anywhere where somebody is just communicating with somebody as a friend, sharing his or her woes, and relationships get tired, and sometimes there's not enough time to devote to one's spouse.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of other responsibilities, and so if somebody's paying somebody else a lot of attention outside of their home, then that can be quite an aphrodisiac.
Yes, I guess that's true. Can I go to Ryan in Brantford? And Ryan, you're on News Talk 1010.
Hi there, John. Thank you for taking my call. My comment goes back to what you guys actually just said, is that, sometimes, a lot of times, men and women view sex differently. The reasons why they, the things that, emotional things that they affirm are different. So like you guys said, in a workplace, if this guy is getting certain types of attention that he's not getting at home, he's experiencing that. It's not the same thing as a woman. So just to boil it down to the simplistic thing that a man is just thinking with his little pee-pee, I think kind of simplifies what's actually going on a lot. And there's a lot more to it.
We'll give. I agree with that entirely, Ryan, and I appreciate that. And let's give Sarah a chance to comment before we take a short break.
I agree with that too. I mean, I think that a lot of relationships, as I said, don't start with with just sex in anybody's mind. It begins as a friendship. I think the stereotype is that men are more led by their little pee-pee than women, that's maybe...
It's probably true. Come on now, Sarah, isn't it?
Well, women don't have little pee-pee.
Well, okay. We're getting technical now, but I think it's probably true. Men seem to be more driven. I think it's maybe part of the natural imperative that men are more driven that way.
Sure, it's a biological, they know when they're aroused.
Yeah, well, I guess they do, which is most of the time. Anyway, Sarah Dirmerman is with us. She can be found at helpmesarah.com on the internet, and we're going to be back to take more of your calls. 416-872-1010, Star Talk 8255. Mary from Belleville is going to stir things up. She's going to say something provocative in just a minute that she said she learned early in her life, and we'll get you to respond to that. The text message board is busy here. The men are rising up, if you'll pardon the expression, saying things like, funny how it takes two to tango. In my profession, I get to see that women out-cheat men 3-1. That's called Girls' Night Out, Adultery Night Standard. Okay. Happily married men, says another listener, don't cheat. And then finally, there's a chorus of people phoning in, men, obviously insecure men that are hurt by all this, saying that they think the least we could do is refer to them not as little pee-pees, but big pee-pees. So whatever. Mary in Belleville, that probably says it all for you in terms of something you learned early on in grade 1. Are you there, Mary?
A couple of things. Many moons ago, when I was a teenager, I read a T-shirt that once said, everything I learned about men, I learned in grade 1. Boys are stupid.
And do you think that kind of sums it up?
Pretty much. And hasn't this been going on since Abraham Lincoln time?
Well, how about Adam and Eve?
Okay. Right.
Having said that, I mean, do you blame men? I'm going to say blame. I mean, do you think more of the responsibility rests with men and their inability to control themselves than with women or anybody else?
No, it takes two to tango, as the expression goes. So, I don't blame men.
Go ahead there, Sarah.
Sorry, I was going to ask. I didn't catch your name.
Her name is Mary.
Sorry, I was going to ask if you think the men are stupid because they're being caught too quickly, that they don't hide their tracks.
No, I think it's because men aren't thinking with their brain, but as John puts it, you know what?
Yeah. They're not thinking with their bigger head.
That's right. Not because they're not covering their tracks, just because they're just
not thinking.
Not thinking.
However, there are so many women having affairs too. What are they stupid as well?
I mean, when was the last time you saw a woman in power in front of the media saying, "Yes, I've had an affair"? It's always the men.
That's a very good point.
But the other thing is, I think that there are more men in power, are there not, in terms of looking at statistics or in terms of percentage of men in power?
Yes, that's correct too. But it's always the men in front of the media.
Yeah, no, it's true. They are. I'll say thank you very much to you, Mary, for that call. Quite insightful. And just give a quick word to Catherine here. Catherine, you've got just one point you want to make here that may be a suggestion people should think about.
Yes, Jim, or I'm sorry.
I'm John, yeah.
John, I first heard about this afternoon with Jim. I had heard nothing previous. And now that you've explained it more fully, this whole thing, it smells to me like either... it smells like a take. If he was over in theater in Afghanistan, why on ever would the publisher send a female ghostwriter to him.
No, it's all, Catherine, it's a good point. Unfortunately, I have to go, but I want to leave that thought provoker with people. And I want to say thank you to Sarah Dirman, as always.
Thank you.
Helpmesarah.com. We will not resolve this matter. It's been going on since Adam and Eve, but we've made some progress this afternoon. We certainly have established that the peepees have something to do with it. Thank you.